The letter sat on the worn oak of my dining table, an alien object in an otherwise predictable Tuesday afternoon. It wasn't even a proper letter, more of a directive, official embossed heading, thick cream paper that somehow felt both sterile and aggressive. My name, Lysander Finch, spelled out in sterile capitals. Then Rhiannon's, just as stark. And beneath it all, barely decipherable through the blurring of my vision, a line referring to Celeste. My breath felt shallow, like my lungs were only managing half effort. A metallic taste coated my tongue. I picked up my coffee mug, cold now, and set it down, the clink echoing too loudly in the sudden quiet of my apartment. It was 3:17 p.m. My work laptop, still open on a spreadsheet, seemed miles away, a relic from a different, simpler existence that was apparently no longer mine. Rhiannon and I, we'd been friends once, more than friends for a time, back when we were barely out of our 20s, full of grand pronouncements and bad decisions. We were 38 and 36 now, respectively. Then, just friends. The kind who drifted in and out of each other's orbits, tethered by a shared history, a brief, intense chapter that had never quite fully closed. Not for me, anyway. Not really. But we hadn't seen each other in person in, 8 months? Our last text exchange was a terse, happy birthday to Celeste, her 7th, which I'd sent to Rhiannon, only getting a thumbs-up emoji back. The document from some county family court office kept using phrases like legal guardian and sole responsibility. I'd always thought of myself as Celeste's godfather. Not even officially, really, just a title I'd sort of adopted and Rhiannon had humored. The cool uncle type, the one who bought the slightly too expensive toys and promised adventures. Godfather, that's what I was. A title that came with zero legal weight, a symbolic gesture. This paper, though, this wasn't symbolic. This was real. My mind was trying to process the words, to string them into a coherent narrative, but they just bounced around, meaningless. Legal guardian. How? When? There was no mention of her, of Rhiannon, beyond her name confirming the relationship to Celeste. No explanation. Just, due to recent circumstances, and as per the attached documentation. What attached documentation? There was only this single sheet, this single devastating sheet, folded perfectly into an envelope addressed to me, Lysander Finch. I traced the stark black text with a finger that felt oddly numb. My usual afternoon ritual, wrapping up work, maybe a quick run, then cooking a simple dinner while listening to an audiobook, felt like a distant, quaint memory from a time that had ended approximately 5 minutes ago. The smell of the coffee, cold and bitter, suddenly felt cloying. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked down at the street below. Kids were getting off a school bus. Their bright jackets, splashes of color against the gray pavement. One of them, a little girl with a bright red backpack, started skipping. My eyes just kept coming back to Rhiannon's name on the page, then Celeste's. Rhiannon, with her wild dark hair, and her laugh that could fill a room, always so fiercely independent, so present. How could she be gone in a way that left this behind? Not just a missing person, but a void so absolute, it had legally transferred the care of her daughter Celeste to me. Without a word, without a warning. Not even a text. Not even a handwritten note shoved in an envelope. The implications started to ripple outwards like cracks in a perfectly smooth pane of glass. My apartment, my life, my quiet, ordered existence, it wasn't built for a child. Not just any child, but a 7-year-old who had known me as Uncle Lysander for occasional visits. Not as the person responsible for her entire world. The enormity of it pressed down, a physical weight. My jaw felt tight, my shoulders hunched. This wasn't a melodramatic movie plot. This was a Tuesday afternoon in my kitchen, and everything had just fundamentally changed. The thought settled, cold and hard, in the pit of my stomach, pushing out all the air. I didn't even know where to start. the words legal guardian reverberated in my head, cutting through the silence of my apartment, each echo a fresh spike of disbelief. It was impossible, utterly and completely impossible. Except the paper, cold and authoritative, said it wasn't. To understand this, I had to rewind, way back, to a different life, a different version of myself. Rhiannon and I met at The Alchemist's Spoon, a coffee shop with mismatched furniture and poetry nights, nestled in a quirky part of Portland, Oregon, back in late 2007. I was 23, fresh out of university, trying to figure out what to do with a degree in something vaguely academic. She was 21, working part-time, dabbling in photography, and convinced she was going to be a performance artist. I was quiet, observant. She was a supernova, all wild curls, passionate arguments, and a laugh that could make you forget whatever mundane thing you were just thinking about. We clicked in that intense, immediate way you do when you're young, and feel like you found another soul who just gets it. We spent the next 2 years tangled up in each other's lives. My apartment, small and organized, often became a canvas for her projects. Paint splatters on my kitchen floor, half-finished sculptures on my dining table. We'd spend evenings at Powell's City of Books, losing ourselves for hours, then walking along the Willamette River, talking about everything and nothing. I was the steady anchor. She was the chaotic, vibrant force that made my quiet life feel exhilarating. She introduced me to art installations, to strange indie bands, to the idea that life didn't have to follow a preset blueprint. I, in turn, tried to make sure she sometimes ate vegetables and remembered to pay her rent on time. It was a delicate balance, one that always felt like it was teetering. Things started to fray around 2009. We loved each other, I think, but we were fundamentally different. She craved spontaneity, change, a refusal to be tied down. I craved stability, a plan, a comfortable routine. We'd fight, not big dramatic blow-ups, but quiet, grinding disagreements about bills, about her disappearing for a weekend without a word, about my need to know where she was. She'd say I was trying to cage her, and I'd counter that I was just trying to live an adult life. Eventually, it became too much. We broke up in a tearful, exhausted conversation on my couch, promising to remain friends because we genuinely couldn't imagine a life without each other, even if it wasn't that life. And we did remain friends, albeit with a certain awkward tenderness. A few years later, in 2014, Rhiannon called me, her voice thin and shaky. She was pregnant. Not mine, she assured me quickly, almost too quickly, but by a musician she'd been seeing, a guy named Orion, who had apparently vanished the moment he heard the news. My first reaction was, well, it was complicated. A mix of shock, a residual pang of something akin to jealousy for the life we hadn't built, and an overwhelming surge of concern for her. She was alone, scared, and, frankly, a bit adrift. I found myself instinctively stepping up. I drove her to appointments, helped her move into a slightly larger, if still ramshackle apartment, listened to her fears. When Celeste was born in early 2015, tiny and perfect, my heart just expanded. It was instant. Rhiannon, holding her daughter for the first time, looked at me, eyes red-rimmed but shining, and said, "Lysander, will you be her godfather?" Not in the church sense, but for life? To look out for her? I agreed without a second thought, the title feeling right, a way to formalize the deep connection I already felt. It was a role I cherished. I bought Celeste her first stuffed animal, a clumsy felted owl. I made sure Rhiannon had diapers and formula in those first few weeks. I was always there, a steady presence for both of them, the reliable constant in Rhiannon's often unpredictable life. But even then, looking back, the red flags were there, fluttering faintly, easily dismissed by my desire to help, to be important to them. Rhiannon was fiercely loving with Celeste, but also incredibly disorganized. Bills went unpaid, appointments were missed, she cycled through jobs, barista, freelance photographer, graphic designer for a local collective, never quite settling. She'd rely on me more than I perhaps should have allowed, asking for loans she sometimes forgot to repay, needing rides because her car was perpetually on its last legs. I just rationalized it as her artistic temperament, her free spirit, or simply a young single mom struggling. It wasn't a problem, I told myself. It was just Rhiannon. She'd talk about these vague, big plans for a better life for Celeste, sometimes in hushed tones, almost conspiratorial, always just out of reach, always needing a bit more time, a bit more money, a bit more something. And I'd just listen, nodding, offering practical advice she rarely took. I saw her less as the years went on. Our interactions, mainly texts and calls, a couple of visits a year with Celeste. But I always figured she was just busy, doing her Rhiannon thing, carving out her own path. I never questioned the underlying stability of it all. I never thought to. And now, this letter, this cold, hard, definitive legal document, shattering the comfortable illusion I'd built for myself. That first afternoon, after reading the letter, I just sat there, numb. The silence in my apartment pressed in. I called my best friend Jasper Thorne, who usually answered on the first ring. It went straight to voicemail. Hey, Jas, it's me. Something really weird just happened. Call me back when you can. My voice sounded strangely detached, even to myself. Then I tried Rhiannon's number. Straight to voicemail. Her new one, the one she'd gotten a few months back. Same thing. This wasn't like her to just vanish. Not like this. The next few days were a blur of frantic phone calls and a growing dread. I tried everyone I knew who might have even a tangential connection to Rhiannon. Her old roommate, Ilara, who I hadn't spoken to in years. A couple of artists from that collective she'd worked with briefly. Even Orion, Celeste's biological father, though I only had a decade-old email address for him, which bounced. No one had seen or heard from her. Ilara, after an initial surprise at hearing from me, admitted Rhiannon had been pretty private lately, keeping a small circle. She just got really focused on a new thing, Ilara said, her voice trailing off. Didn't talk much about it, said it was going to change everything for her and Celeste. That phrase, change everything, hung in the air, suddenly ominous. The first concrete incident happened a week after the letter arrived. I'd been trying to get hold of the family court, but it was like navigating a labyrinth. Endless hold music, transferring from department to department. Finally, I got through to someone, a paralegal named Kincaid, whose voice was flat and unyielding. Mr. Finch, the order is quite clear. Miss Vance designated you as Celeste's sole legal guardian in a notarized document signed last June. It also stipulates a limited power of attorney for financial matters, effective immediately. My mouth went dry. Limited power of attorney? What financial matters? And designated. She just signed a paper and didn't tell me. Miss Kincaid's tone barely shifted. All legal and binding, sir. We have a copy of her will on file as well, which reiterates the guardianship. As for her current whereabouts, our office does not have that information. You need to contact law enforcement if you believe a person is missing. That's when it hit me. Truly hit me. The cold, hard reality. Rhiannon wasn't just unreachable, she was gone. And she had done this deliberately, without a word to me. The will. That meant she was preparing for something final. I hung up the phone, my hand shaking despite my best efforts. The phrase, limited power of attorney for financial matters, echoed. What finances? Rhiannon never had anything substantial. My mind raced, trying to grasp at any explanation. Was she sick? Had she joined some cult? The possibilities, each more horrifying than the last, swirled. I finally managed to get Jasper on the phone late that evening. He'd been on a remote fieldwork trip. Lysander, what's going on? You sound awful. I tried to explain. stumbling over the words, the absurdity of it all. Jazz, Rhiannon. She's gone. And she left Celeste to me. Legally. Like actual legal guardianship. There was a long silence on the other end. Whoa. Whoa, wait. What? Like, permanently gone? I just exhaled. I don't know. The court says she signed papers in June. A will, too. She just vanished. No one knows where she is, and I'm her legal guardian now. Jasper, usually so quick with a quip, sounded genuinely floored. Lysander, man, that's insane. What are you even supposed to do? His reaction, the sheer disbelief in his voice, somehow grounded me, confirmed I wasn't losing my mind. This was insane. The second concrete incident happened 3 days later. I went to Rhiannon's apartment. The landlord, a woman named Paloma with a kind but weary face, opened the door. Oh, Mr. Finch, you're here. I was wondering when you'd show up. Her rent's due, and she hasn't answered her phone in weeks. Paloma let me in. The apartment was tidy, almost eerily so. Not sparse, but prepared. No clutter. The kitchen counter was wiped clean. The only personal things were a few photos on the fridge. Rhiannon and Celeste, Celeste's drawings. Celeste's room was immaculate. A small pile of neatly folded clothes in a basket. Her favorite unicorn plushie sitting on the bed. It wasn't the usual whirlwind of Rhiannon's life. It felt emptied out. Did she say anything to you, Paloma? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Paloma wrung her hands. Just that she was going on a long trip. Said it was important for Celeste's future. She packed up a couple of suitcases, gave me the key, said she'd be in touch about the lease. A long trip. No mention of me, no instructions. It was like she wanted to sever all ties clean. The sense of betrayal of being completely sidelined from such a monumental decision twisted in my gut. I felt a surge of anger, hot and sharp. How could she do this? Just leave her daughter and dump the responsibility on me without so much as a conversation? My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Celeste's school, Brightwood Elementary. Mr. Finch, Celeste hasn't been in class for 3 weeks. We've been trying to reach Miss Vance, but that phone call solidified the situation. Celeste was not just missing her mother. She was missing from her life entirely. I explained the situation to the school, feeling the weight of the new title, legal guardian, settle heavily on my shoulders. They were surprisingly understanding, probably having dealt with difficult family situations before. They told me Celeste was safe, currently staying with a temporary foster family organized by Child Protective Services after a concerned neighbor noticed her absence. CPS was aware of the court order, but because of the abruptness, they needed to verify me first. The third incident, meeting Celeste again. This was the hardest. I arranged a meeting through CPS at their office. The room was sterile, a bland beige. Celeste was sitting at a small table, drawing with crayons. Her hair, usually wild like her mother's, was neatly braided. She looked up when I walked in, her eyes wide. A flicker of something I couldn't quite name. Recognition, confusion, a deep sadness passing through them. Uncle Lysander, she said, her voice small. I tried to smile to project calm, but my stomach was a knot of anxiety. Hey, sweet pea. Yeah, it's me. A CPS caseworker, a woman named Doctor. Anya Sharma was also there, watching us carefully. Where's Mama? Celeste asked, her lower lip trembling. I knelt down, trying to meet her eyes, but she looked away. My carefully constructed explanation about Rhiannon needing to go on a long trip felt flimsy, inadequate, a lie I was suddenly complicit in. I wanted to tell her the truth that I didn't know, that her mother had just left, but how could I? To a 7-year-old. She had to go away for a while, sweetie. But she asked me to look after you, to stay with me. Celeste just stared at her drawing, a son with a frowny face. When is she coming back? Her voice was barely audible. I had no answer. None. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken questions and my own rising panic. I wasn't just dealing with legal papers anymore. I was dealing with a child's broken heart, and I felt utterly unprepared. My ordered, quiet life, it was already splintering into a million pieces. The days bled into weeks. Celeste was with me now, officially. The transition was rough for both of us. My apartment felt small and unfamiliar, with the constant hum of a child's presence, the scattered toys, the sudden questions about why I didn't have any glitter glue. I tried to be patient, to be understanding, but inside, a knot of resentment and bewilderment was tightening. Rhiannon. How could she? What was this long trip? My anger towards her was a dull throb, sometimes flaring into a hot rage. It was a Saturday, about 3 weeks after Celeste moved in, that the real moment of truth, the sickening, undeniable clarity, finally hit. I was doing laundry, trying to find a matching pair of Celeste's socks, when I noticed something tucked deep inside a laundry bag she'd brought from Rhiannon's apartment. A bag I hadn't properly unpacked, just dumped into the hamper. It was a small, leather-bound journal, Rhiannon's journal. I recognized the unique, slightly sprawling script from the cover, RV, embossed in faded gold. My stomach gave a strange lurch, a mix of apprehension and a desperate hope for answers. I took it to my desk, the journal feeling heavy in my hands like a forbidden object. Celeste was watching a cartoon in the living room, her laughter a bright, fragile sound. I flipped through the first few pages, mostly sketches, observations, song lyrics. Then further in, I found it. Entries started around April of last year, just a few months before she'd signed those guardianship papers. The tone shifted, growing darker, more secretive. There were references to the collective, the work, and our true purpose. Vague, unsettling phrases that set my teeth on edge. Then I saw a name, Malachi. And with Malachi came a narrative. He was charismatic, persuasive, someone Rhiannon had met at an art fair. He spoke of enlightenment, of shedding the shackles of the material world, of a higher calling. My blood didn't run cold. No, it felt more like a slow, creeping dread, an icy tendril coiling around my chest. Rhiannon, always susceptible to grand ideas, always searching for something more, something deeper than the mundane. One entry, dated early June, stood out, scrawled in a hurried, almost frantic hand. Malachi says we have to go. Fully commit. Leave everything behind. It's the only way to truly ascend. They'll try to stop us, the outsiders, the unbelievers. Celeste. She needs to be protected, kept from the darkness. Lysander will care for her. He's stable, grounded. He'll give her a good, ordinary life. It's what she deserves, while I fulfill my destiny. The words hit me like a physical blow. Not sick, not a cult, not just a way. This was intentional, a conscious decision. She wasn't gone because of some tragedy. She was gone because she chose to leave, to abandon her daughter, to surrender her life to some enigmatic destiny with this Malachi. My eyes kept returning to the phrase, good, ordinary life, like it was a consolation prize, a lesser path. It felt like a punch to the gut. The world outside my window, usually a calming backdrop, felt suddenly vibrant, cruelly indifferent to the wreckage unfolding in my hands. The low rumble of a passing garbage truck, the distant siren of an ambulance, all normal sounds, but they felt alien, echoing in a space where my perception of reality had just shattered. I closed the journal, my fingers gripping the worn leather, the texture rough against my skin. My breath caught in my throat, not a gasp, but more like a choked whimper. My vision blurred, not from tears, but from the sheer force of the realization. All this time, I'd worried, I'd been angry, I'd been confused. Now I was just hollow. All those years, her unpredictability, her vague plans, her need for something more, it wasn't just Rhiannon being Rhiannon, it was a precursor. A slow, steady drift towards something utterly self-destructive. And I hadn't seen it, hadn't even considered it. I needed to confront someone, not Rhiannon, she wasn't here, but someone who knew, someone who was complicit in this delusion. I flipped back through the journal, desperate, frantic. There were mentions of a gathering in an old warehouse district near the industrial docks, an area I knew well. The Temple of the Ascendant Light, she'd called it. I looked at the date of the entry about the gathering. It was the week before Celeste disappeared from school. My thoughts were a chaotic jumble. Denial warred with sickening certainty. This couldn't be real. Rhiannon wouldn't do this. But the journal, her handwriting, her words, they were undeniable. She had meticulously planned this, planned to leave Celeste to me, without a word, without a goodbye. It was a calculated, selfish act, cloaked in spiritual grandiosity. I remember standing up, the chair scraping loudly against the wooden floor, making Celeste briefly pause her cartoon. She glanced at me, her small face, expectant, maybe hoping I'd join her. I couldn't. Not now. I had to go. I had to see. I snatched my car keys, my movements jerky and uncoordinated. As I headed out, I remember catching a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror. My face was pale, my eyes wide and bloodshot. I looked like a stranger, like someone who had just walked through a terrible storm. The apartment felt too quiet as I left, Celeste's cartoon laughter fading behind me. My heart wasn't pounding. It felt cold and heavy, a dead weight in my chest. The betrayal was absolute. It wasn't just that she left, but how she left and what she expected of me. To simply pick up the pieces, her chosen, stable replacement. I drove across town, the journal clutched in my passenger seat. The sun was dipping, casting long shadows. The old warehouse district was exactly as I remembered it. Desolate, graffiti-scarred, a monument to forgotten industry. There it was, a building with a hastily painted symbol on its corrugated metal door. A stylized eye within a pyramid. The Temple of the Ascendant Light. No one was around. The street empty, except for a lone, mangy cat picking through a dumpster. The air smelled of damp concrete and something acrid, metallic. I pushed open the door. It wasn't locked. The silence inside was profound, thick and dusty. And then I saw it. A single crumpled piece of paper on the floor, near a makeshift altar with a few burnt-out candles. It was a notice from the city, dated a week ago. Condemned. Unsafe structure. Evacuate immediately. The entire temple had been shut down. They weren't there anymore. They were gone. Again. The realization was sickening. She hadn't gone on a long trip to fulfill a destiny. She'd joined a flimsy, probably scam artist-led group that had literally been condemned out of its meeting space. And she still left Celeste. The full weight of her recklessness, her delusion, and my own blindness crashed over me. I slowly sank to the dusty floor, the cold concrete seeping into my jeans, staring at that condemnation notice, the final, undeniable proof, sitting on that grimy warehouse floor, the city's condemnation notice mocking me. The cold, stark truth settled like concrete in my gut. Rhiannon hadn't just made a bad decision. She'd made a monumentally irresponsible, destructive one. And I was left to deal with the fallout. The anger returned, sharper now, laced with a bitter taste of self-reproach. How could I have been so naive, so blind to the severity of her tendencies? The practical problems were immediate and overwhelming. My apartment, a well-organized one-bedroom, was suddenly bursting at the seams. Celeste needed her own space, her own routine. My work as a data analyst, which required long stretches of focused concentration, became almost impossible. I was constantly distracted, juggling school pickups, doctor's appointments, and the endless questions of a 7-year-old adjusting to a completely new life. Sleep became a luxury. My evenings, once spent in quiet contemplation or with a book, were now a whirlwind of homework, dinner negotiations, and bedtime stories. Financially, it was a sudden, jarring shift. Rhiannon, predictably, left nothing. In fact, her limited power of attorney status was a joke. All it revealed was a trail of unpaid bills and a maxed-out credit card. She'd essentially bequeathed me her debt along with her daughter. I had savings, thankfully, but they weren't geared towards supporting a child long-term. Childcare was a nightmare to arrange and prohibitively expensive. I found myself scrutinizing every expense, cutting back on everything non-essential. It felt like I was starting from scratch, but with a massive, pre-existing set of responsibilities. My friends were supportive in their own ways. Jasper, after the initial shock, became a rock. He'd come over, bring dinner, play board games with Celeste, giving me a precious hour or two of quiet. "Lysander, man, you're doing good," he'd say, clapping me on the shoulder. "It's a lot, but you're stepping up." My parents, however, were confused. They adored Celeste, but the idea of me, their quiet, methodical son, suddenly being a full-time single dad, was jarring for them. My mother, Alara, called frequently, offering advice, some helpful, some outdated, all tinged with an underlying anxiety for my future. "Are you sure you can handle this, dear?" It's a huge undertaking. I always reassured her I could, even when my own resolve wavered. The emotional roller coaster was brutal. Some days I'd wake up feeling utterly defeated, resentful of the life that had been thrust upon me. Other days, watching Celeste laugh at something silly on TV, or seeing her proudly show me a drawing she'd made, a surge of fierce protectiveness would wash over me, momentarily eclipsing everything else. I'd feel guilt for my anger towards Rhiannon, then righteous fury for what she had done to Celeste. It was a constant push and pull. Legally, things moved slowly. I formally reported Rhiannon missing, though the police weren't particularly optimistic. "She's an adult, Mr. Watt Finch. If she left of her own free will, there's not much we can do unless we find evidence of foul play." I shared the journal entries, the Temple of the Ascendant Light information, but it led nowhere. The cult, or whatever it was, had evaporated. It was a dead end. I tried to establish a new normal. We found a small 2-bedroom apartment near Celeste's old school, making the transition a little easier for her. I enrolled her in a local art class, something she'd loved doing with Rhiannon. I even started to look for a job with more flexibility. Maybe something remote, even if it meant a pay cut. Small attempts at recovery, at rebuilding. Some worked, some didn't. The art class brought a genuine smile to Celeste's face. My attempts at cooking, however, often resulted in burnt dinners and silent, tearful rejections from her. Then, one evening, while sorting through some old boxes Rhiannon had stored, in the back of a closet, boxes that were meant to hold old photo albums, but were mostly filled with random junk, I made another unexpected discovery. Tucked under a pile of scarves was a single, folded letter. It was from Rhiannon, addressed to me, but clearly never sent. The envelope was unsealed. My hands, after all these months, still felt a tremor as I opened it. It was dated a week before she disappeared. "Lysander," it began, her familiar, looping handwriting filling the page. "If you're reading this, it means I've gone, and you have Celeste. I know this is a terrible thing to do, but I truly believe it's for the best. Malachi says the world is shifting, and I need to be free to meet it, to find my true self. Celeste deserves stability, a normal life, a safe harbor. You're that harbor, Lysander. You always have been. Please forgive me. I love her, you know I do, but I can't be the mother she needs. I have to find my own path, my own truth, the path to the ascendant light. Take care of our little star. Tell her I miss her, always." The letter wasn't an explanation. It was an abdication, a confirmation of my worst fears, wrapped in self-serving, spiritual nonsense. It offered no solace, no closure, just a deeper, colder understanding of the woman I once loved, and who had now, in her own twisted way, passed her burden onto me, absolving herself of any responsibility. The resentment solidified into something harder, colder. There was no going back. This was my life now, our life. It's been almost a year since that letter arrived, since Celeste came to live with me. I'm not going to lie and say it's easy. It's still incredibly hard most days. We're in the new apartment now, a 2-bedroom that actually feels like a home, slowly filling with Celeste's drawings and the comforting clutter of a child's life. My old, sterile apartment now feels like a ghost of a past I hardly recognize. I've shifted to a fully remote role at work, a different department, which gives me the flexibility I desperately need, even if the pay isn't quite what I'm used to. Celeste is doing better. She talks about her mom less frequently now, and the raw ache in her voice has softened into something resembling wistful memory. We celebrate her birthdays and holidays, and I try to create new traditions for us, things that are uniquely ours. I'm learning to braid her hair badly, and she's teaching me how to play some of the ridiculously complicated video games she loves. It's a slow, tender process of rebuilding, day by day. I still see flashes of Rhiannon in her, that mischievous glint in her eyes, a certain way she tilts her head when she's thinking, and it still stings. A mix of love and lingering anger. What have I learned? That life doesn't follow your carefully laid plans. The people you think you know can surprise you in the most devastating ways. And that sometimes the greatest acts of love are the ones you never anticipated. I used to be so focused on my own quiet order, my own predictable path. Now, my life is a beautiful mess, full of noise and laughter and endless demands. I've learned to embrace the chaos, to find joy in the small, everyday moments I would have once overlooked. I've learned to cook more than just microwave meals, out of necessity. My relationship with Jasper has deepened. He's seen me at my absolute worst, and he's still here. My parents are slowly adjusting, though my mother still calls to check if Celeste is eating enough vegetables. I still haven't truly forgiven Rhiannon. Maybe I never will. But the anger doesn't consume me like it used to. It's there, a dull ache. But it's not the primary emotion. The future? It's a blank page, really. My old plans, travel, a bigger place for just myself, maybe finding a partner who understood my quiet life, they're all gone. Replaced by school schedules, pediatrician appointments, and the daunting, wonderful task of raising a child who isn't biologically mine, but who is entirely mine in every other way that counts. Will Rhiannon ever come back? Will Celeste ever understand why her mother left? Will I ever fully understand it? I don't know. I honestly don't. But I'm here. We're here. And that's enough for now. Thank you for letting me just put this out there. It helps knowing it's not just echoing in my own head anymore.